However, Ma Fei did not notice anything around him and continued to persuade all the students to follow him, promising them all success then. So he thought even though Qiao Yu was a necromancer, he would be able to prove to everyone that only he Ma Fei was the most suitable candidate to be the class leader. After all, he believed that he was the strongest in their class. At the same time, Qiao Yu was thinking about something else. He didn't understand what this strange world was for beginners and why there were no system prompts or notifications. Suddenly, a strange old man came out of the shadows and his appearance immediately attracted the attention of all the students. He said, "What a pity. How young and innocent they all are, what a pity." However, his appearance was quite the opposite and seemed to be amused by the whole situation. Ma Fei immediately got into a fighting stance and asked the stranger who he was. "A NPC. Qiao Yu wasn't so rude and politely asked the old man what he meant by telling them that. But the old man seemed not to hear their questions and gloomily continued, telling them welcome to Nightmare Village. Immediately, as if on cue, thunder sounded behind him and lightning lit up the sky. A system notification appeared in front of each of the students that said, "Welcome to the beginner's training, Nightmare Village with the difficulty of S rank." Even though the difficulty of beginner's training was calculated separately from the other worlds, the difficulty of the S-rank training world was roughly the same as the normal E-rank world. In order to complete this training it was necessary to get out of here alive and find the secret in the heart of the Nightmare Village. All that information seemed to mean nothing to the students, who were just scared to death when they heard that they were in the Nightmare Village. The same Nightmare Village that had killed 40 people and that no one had ever been through before. Some of the students, mad with fear, decided to try to escape and ran straight to the gates of the village. They shouted that they wanted to go home to mommy and didn't want to play these games anymore. Ma Fei tried to stop them and told everyone to calm down and not to worry, because he would definitely protect everyone and get them out of the Nightmare Village. Xiao Yu didn't pay attention to his shouting and tried to remember what they were taught at school. He realized that in order to succeed in this world of E-rank, the students had to be at least an early stage level, while they were all at the disciples level. And he just couldn't imagine how they were supposed to pass under these conditions. The levels in this other world were divided into several classes: disciple, early stage, middle stage and late stage. There were also 2 more stages of development not available to all, king and godly. They could only be reached by exceptionally capable students with rare roles and talents. To the surprise of students trying to escape, they were pushed back by an invisible barrier. Despite the obviousness of what was happening, they did not understand what was happening and why they were thrown back as soon as they approached the gate. The old man looked at their futile but nevertheless persistent attempts and advised them to stop trying. After all, once they entered the Nightmare Village, they would never be able to leave it again. Hearing this, almost all the students were seized with panic. A bloody invisible wall was blocking their way to freedom, and now they began to wail in panic that their fate was sealed and they would all die here and nothing could save them. One of the students was horrified by this. He was from a rich family and wasn't going to die yet. While Ma Fei unsuccessfully asked all the students to pull themselves together, calm down and trust him, because he would definitely be able to get everyone out. His pathetic attempts to take over were already starting to get tiresome. At the same time, Xiao Yu calmly pondered over their situation. No wonder the previous class entering this village had been wiped out. After all, the task of this mission to find the secret in the core of the Nightmare Village seemed impossible for beginners. However, despite everything, this old man, although he looked mysterious, most likely did not wish them any harm and was not their enemy. The old man, however, walked in the middle of the students who were frozen in terror and said that they shouldn't worry too much about their fate, and since they were all here, they should make themselves as comfortable as possible. Ma Fei smugly thought that he understood everything and asked the old man if he really wanted them to relax and face all the dangers and trials with confidence, right? But the old man just looked at him gloomily like a fool and explained that he didn't mean that at all, but that since they were all here they should relax and just accept the fact that they were all going to die here. The poor frightened students' jaws dropped at that statement. All their worst fears and nightmares were coming true. Finally, the old man got tired of playing with them and scaring them, so he decided to introduce himself. It turned out that he was the head of the Nightmare Village and his name was Wagan. And now he announced to everyone that in order to live in the Nightmare Village there were only 2 strict requirements. 1, they could live in any of the empty houses, but they were not to touch the black stones above the doors to their homes under any circumstances. At first glance, it seemed like nothing complicated about it. The second requirement was that they were to return to their homes before dark and shut all windows and doors tightly. And they were also not to open them no matter what. Xiao Yu immediately had a question that he immediately asked the village head: wondering why they couldn't leave their houses after dark. But, he only gloomily replied that he would realize it himself right after nightfall. A little time passed after the village had explained everything to them and evening came. All the students decided to heed Wagon's advice and agreed to first find empty houses to hide in. For this purpose, they divided into 4 groups of 11 people per group. When Xiao Yu's group found an empty house and opened the door to it, they immediately noticed the strange black stones above the door. But the night was already too close and they didn't have time to look at them much, so they hurriedly entered the house and closed the door tightly behind them. For safety they went up to the 2nd floor and decided to rest there for the night. As soon as everyone went to their places, Xiao Yu came already familiar to us girl healer and using all her charms began to convince our protagonist to protect her first of all if there is any danger. She even winked at him and reminded him that she was a healer and could give him lots and lots of health points. It seemed that Xiao Yu didn't show her any proper interest or attention. However, her behavior infuriated the other girl who was a paladin by specialization. She walked up to them and unhappily asked Zhao Ziyue how could she be so shameless. After all, there were so many classmates looking at her right now, and she was acting so defiantly. Zhao Ziyue was indignant at such brazen statements and replied, "If I'm okay with it, how is it any of your business? Get out of here." But Sui Yu was not going to back down and asked her if she thought she should be proud of looking like a cow with big breasts. Zhao Ziyue told her that it was much better than having nothing at all. Watching such an argument, Xiao Yu felt very awkward and didn't know what to do, so he chose the best possible option in such a situation and just kept quiet. Sui Yu lastly just resentfully replied that she had such advantages simply because she was fat. Suddenly, in the background, our protagonist noticed one of the students who was heading towards the window like a mesmerized person. He seemed to see something there that the others didn't and couldn't stop. The next moment his eyes filled with tears of joy and he exclaimed, "Granny! Granny! I missed you so much." This guy thought he could see his grandmother, who was standing right outside the window. She even called him by name and asked her best grandchild to help Granny, because it was so cold and scary outside. Seeing his hesitation, she also asked him if he would open the window so his grandmother could hug him. Finally the boy couldn't stand it and told her that he would open the window right away. This spirit resembled his grandmother, but as we all realize, it was not her at all. As the guy was opening the window, Xiao Yu shouted at him to stop and not do it, because it wasn't his grandmother at all. But it was already too late. As soon as the window opened, the so-called grandmother immediately stopped looking like herself and a gloating smirk appeared on her face. And she immediately burst into the room and lunged at the gullible idiot who let her in. He didn't even immediately realize that it wasn't his grandmother in front of him and asked her in horror, what was she doing? He would have died like that if it wasn't for a good reaction and a well-chosen spell from Yang Xiangdi, who used sand binding to stop the creature from entering their home. Feeling the power of the monster, he asked his companions to hurry up and act because he would not be able to hold it back for long. Within moments, the monster returned to its true form and destroyed the spell holding it back. But that was enough time for the idiot who had let the creature in to save his skin and was already running away. It turned out to be a normal level 3 nightmare monster with 50 points of health and good strength and dexterity, along with the enchantment talent. After seeing its stats, all the students were shocked. They didn't understand how this monster could be so strong. In this village, are even the weakest monsters so powerful? In their opinion, this beginner world was completely wrong and corrupt. Nightmare was not going to wait for permission to attack and rushed towards the nearest student, which happened to be Yang Xiangdi. Seeing that the monster was approaching him, he shouted, "Damn it! Don't come over here. If you eat such fatty meat, you'll get the 3 highs." By 3 highs he meant high blood pressure, high blood sugar and high concentration of fat in the blood. What a cunning little fatty he was. Luckily his fat ass was saved with a shield that the nightmare's claws couldn't penetrate. It was Sui Yu who came to his rescue and now she was holding back the monster at the cost of her own health. Every second of maintaining the shield took away her health points. She herself wouldn't last that long, so telling Yang Xiangdi to leave, she immediately asked the healer to treat her. And she also asked Xiao Yu to call upon the undead to contain and distract this nightmare. How wrong she was in her expectations. But still, Zhao Ziyue and Xiao Yu were willing to help her in any way they could. Zhao Ziyue used her healing magic. And like a fresh breeze, it began to restore the paladin's health, even faster than she was losing health. Now Sui Yu was sure that as long as everyone worked together, dealing with this nightmare shouldn't be a difficult task. She thought that, right now, all she needed to do was to hold out until Xiao Yu could summon the undead. But what was her surprise when she saw that instead of hiding behind their backs and preparing a spell, he rushed forward to attack. And with all his might, he swung his staff at the nightmare, who was surprised by this behavior. Even young Xiangdi couldn't stand it and warned his friend that he shouldn't do that, and he was going to use the staff for the wrong purpose. Now if the nightmare could get close and attack him, he would definitely die. But our hero didn't pay attention to all this and simply destroyed the nightmare with one blow, removing all 50 points of health from him at once. Everyone around froze in surprise, not understanding what happened. While the nightmare vaporized and the remnants of its spirit flew out the window, some glowing darkness was left behind on the floor. The other students were surprised. How could a nightmare with 50 health points be killed just in the blink of an eye, just like now? They wondered if all necromancers fought this way. This was a bit out of their ideas about necromancers. After calming down a bit, they all gathered around what was left of the nightmare. It turned out that after killing the nightmare, it had turned into a black stone that was already starting to evaporate. The girls noticed that the symbol on this thing was exactly the same as the stones above the doors of their house, and considering that both of these things were from the Nightmare Village, it wasn't strange at all. At the same time, Xiao Yu did not understand what had happened. It was quite strange, and he was already starting to think that it was some kind of game bug. Why didn't he get any skill points even though he had killed the nightmare with a melee attack? His brooding was noticed by Zuiyu, so she asked him if he noticed anything strange. But he only looked at the vaporizing stone and replied that it was nothing. He was probably just overthinking things. The next day all the groups were leaving their houses. The students from the protagonist's group were still thanking God and the heavens for being together with Xiaoyu Yu and Zuiyu last night. They simply admired their strength. But still, even now when they remembered the nightmare monster, they still got chills. The conversations of those students were listened to closely by Ma Fei. Especially that they thought that the right thing for them to do was to stay close to Xiaoyu, because he was super strong and could deal with the nightmare in a split second. They also praised Zuiyu, who using her shield was able to directly stop the nightmare's attack and generally acted very impressively. Hearing this, Ma Fei thought that if he was there, he would definitely not let a girl, especially one as fragile looking as Zuiyu, tank the damage. In his opinion, hiding behind a girl's back was not something a manly guy should do. He was sure that he could defeat all the nightmares with one blow. And there was no limit to his self-confidence and pompousness. Absorbed in his thoughts, he involuntarily swung his sword, which looked just like a morning workout. Our protagonist noticed this and praised his hard working. Young Xiangdi agreed with his friend and said that this was expected of a class president, as it was this kind of diligence that allowed him to surpass many other students. However, Ma Fei only awkwardly coughed and looked around to see if anyone else saw his movements. He started to justify that he just decided to practice for a second. As soon as he saw Zuiyu, he immediately decided to act to lure her into his group. He offered her to stay with him that night, because he would definitely not let her do any damage. But the girl only resented such an offer, because her role is tank. And if she won't do it, then who will? Does he really want to do it? Ma Fei didn't understand why she was indignant and decided to explain to her that he meant that he could handle the nightmare himself without any outside help. She wouldn't even have to do anything. This only made Zuiyu more angry. She replied to him that this kind of thinking was wrong. After all, their teacher had said before they left for training that they needed to learn to work together. Then she added that he couldn't just always want to do everything alone and he should learn from Xiaoyu. Suddenly, a shout was heard, "Kill them all!" All the students immediately turned around to see what happened. It turned out that with that shout, the entire village's population was running towards them, armed with whatever they could find. They were all commanded by the village chief, who ordered them not to let anyone escape. Catch them all and tie them up over the fire. Let the flames burn away their sins. Kill anyone who resists at once. Wagon seemed to be serious and nothing could hold back his rage. What could have happened overnight that he had changed his attitude towards the students so much? Ma Fei immediately stepped forward and decided to discuss and resolve everything peacefully first, as he believed that this was some kind of misunderstanding. He decided to ask the village headman about it. But he confidently replied that there was no misunderstanding at all. Don't they realize what they did last night? Xiao Yu, while he was assessing the impending danger, the number of armed villagers was about the same as the number of students, and their ages were also similar. This brought up certain thoughts, although he didn't know for sure yet. Ma Fei finally realized what he was talking about, and asked him again if he meant that they had killed the nightmare last night. Hearing what he called the creature, Wagon ordered him to shut up, for that was the protective spirit of the Nightmare Village, not a monster. And because they had broken the rules of the Nightmare Village last night, the protective spirit had tried to punish them. Now, no wonder the protective spirits would be angered by this incident, and all of them, the Nightmare Village residents, will end up suffering alongside them. Now, those responsible must die 1,000 deaths for their sin. Die 1,000 deaths. Suddenly, Ma Fei had an idea on how to make things right. So he, with all the respect he was capable of, asked the village head if there was any way to save the nightmare, that is, the protective spirit, if they accidentally killed it. As expected, there was. But it was not simple. The person who had angered the protective spirits had to stay outside the house when night fell. Wagon highly doubted that there would be such a daredevil among them. Ma Fei thought the same thing. After all, no one knows how many such nightmares live in Nightmare Village, and the night might hide even greater dangers than the one they met last night. It seemed to him that the decision to stay outside for the night was a sure suicide. Then the hero stepped forward and said, "Enough. I killed the nightmare or protector spirit, whatever you want to call it. I will wait here for night to fall." Even Ma Fei was surprised at his courage, and asked him if he had lost his mind. This isn't how he could steal the limelight. He asking for death. At the same time, he turned to the village head apologizing for his stupid classmate, who is a bit slow-witted, and it's best not to listen to what he says. However, Xiao Yu advised the head of the class to just relax. After all, he hasn't lost his mind at all, he just wants to check something. There is a chance that it will help them all leave this cursed world. Well, then the village chief decided to give it a try. And he ordered the brat locked up. Our protagonist was immediately chained to a wooden cross in the middle of the square. After that, his classmates came up to him with questions. They were wondering what he meant by saying that this could help them leave this world. Had he really found the secret in the core of the Nightmare Village? Xiao Yu replied contentedly that it could be so. And he would test his theory this night. The night came rather quickly, along with a gloomy greenish mist and a full moon. Immediately afterward, one of the nightmares appeared on the roof of one of the houses. The nightmare had already noticed with its many eyes the victim left for it and was about to devour it. The nightmare began to approach our hero at a great speed. After he felt the monster's approach, a slight smile appeared on his face. But Nightmare never managed to get to him because he was stopped by sand magic, which turned out to belong to his friend Yang Xiangdi, who told him to hurry up, as he would only be able to hold the monster back for a second. However, Ma Fei, who had arrived with his sword in hand, smugly told him to relax, as he was a true swordsman who could take care of everyone and defeat all the monsters. However, in the next instant, a look of bewilderment appeared on his smug and confident face, since the monster had already managed to destroy the spell. After realizing the monster's true strength, he was a little scared, and he also couldn't understand how Xiao Yu managed to kill such a strong monster for a split second. But he had no time to hesitate, and telling himself that if you could do it, he could do it too, he rushed at the enemy with firm confidence. As he got close to Nightmare, he instantly dealt him a defense-breaking strike that took only 5 health from him. While Ma Fei was fighting the monster, Xiao Yu was approached by Zhao Ziyue and Zui Yu, who, when asked why they were here, said that they were afraid that he would be in danger if he was alone, so they came to help him. Trying to untie the chains with which the protagonist was tied, the paladin girl said that they needed Ma Fei's sword, with which they would be able to break the chains, but he could not do it right now, because he was fighting a monster. However, there was no need, because in the next moment our hero easily broke the chain, which surprised the girls and made them wonder if he was really a necromancer. At the same time, Ma Fei, who was fighting the monster, began to lose his advantage, and slowly retreated. Seeing this, Zui Yu shouted for Zhao Ziyue to heal him while she activated her shield. But he was determined and replied that he should defeat the monster on his own, because real heroes were made in real battles, and scars were their badges of pride. Deciding not to interfere, the guys began to advise Ma Fei to aim Nightmare in the head, which was most likely his weak point. Such a conclusion they made after Xiao Yu one blow of the staff on the head finished him. Xiao Yu replied that he would do so. However, the protagonist refuted this theory, saying that the Nightmare's weak point was not his head. Hearing this, he smiled smugly and asked if he was afraid of being outmatched. Then shouting for everyone to watch his next attack, as it would be beautiful. He gave the monster a few blows on its supposed weak point, namely its head, and then he paused behind the Nightmare, thinking that he had already won. However, when he turned around, he was puzzled because the monster was alive and his attack had only taken away 10 health, which made him ask the girls if the monster's weak point was really its head. Zui Yu herself couldn't understand what was going on, because last time Xiao Yu was able to finish off the monster with a single blow. But Yang Xiangdi guessed what the problem was, and told the guy that he was just not as good as Qiao Yu. These words made Ma Fei very angry, because he couldn't accept that he was a swordsman who could be weaker than a necromancer. He was also furious that they started shouting at him to retreat and trust Qiao Yu, as he would definitely die if he received even one blow. However, even though the guys said so, he did not retreat. Standing alone with his sword in his hands in front of the nightmare that was about to strike, he activated his defense-breaking strike ability. As soon as he swung his sword, a multitude of wind blades flew towards the monster, which in total took away 30 points of health from the monster. Standing in front of the monster lying on the ground with only 5 points of health left, Ma Fei said to himself that he had to kill it and prove that he was as good as Qiao Yu. However, he was unable to do so, as the staff strike that Qiao Yu gave him finished off the monster in the next instant. This turn of events both shocked and angered Ma Fei, as all his efforts were now in vain. While he shouted irritably at our hero and asked how he could do such a shameless act, he only praised him for a job well done, began to look at the black crystal in his hand. The next moment, the black crystal in his hand began to disappear. Ma Fei at the same time continued to shout at Xiao Yu in anger and resentment. However, they did not have time to quarrel, because the next moment 2 more nightmare appeared, which quickly began to approach them. This development of events took the guys by surprise, because they did not know whether they could resist against the 2 monsters. However, Qiao Yu immediately shouted for everyone to go inside and not fight the nightmare, as he had an idea how they could pass the mission. After slamming the door of the house right in front of the 2 monsters, our heroes found themselves in a room where Zui Yu immediately asked the protagonist what he meant when he said that he had an idea how they could pass the test. He replied that they would find out tomorrow, adding that when the time came, he and they should just listen to him. As expected, the next morning the village head started yelling at our heroes, saying that even though they had been given a chance to redeem themselves, they had dared to kill another spirit, and then he added angrily that they should all go to hell for it. For no matter what they were going to say, he could not let them destroy his village. Turning to the head, Xiao Yu asked him if they were really the inhabitants of this village, to which he irritably called our hero trash, replied that they had lived here for generations, adding that he should not try to stall for time, as their death was already predetermined. Sighing, Xiao Yu said that since it had come to this point, he should reveal the truth about Nightmare Village, for there could only be one truth. Hearing this, the man incredulously and irritatedly asked what he was talking about. Pointing a finger at each of the villagers, the protagonist replied that each of them was not the original villagers. Then added in a grim voice that all of them are the class that was wiped out in the Nightmare Village previously. And that they were all trapped in this fantasy reality from the moment they entered, and they had no way of leaving this world. But his words didn't convince the man, who himself didn't want to believe in the guy's words. He laughed and replied that he just did not want to die, and for this reason he made up stories. Hearing this, Qiao Yu replied that he had proof of the truth of his words. Taking out the stone that he managed to get yesterday after Nightmare's death, he showed it to everyone. The village head immediately shouted in horror as he dared to remove the protection stone from his place, and also added that he should die for it. But as it turned out, the protective crystal was not only in his possession, each of the guys who decided to trust Xiao Yu held a crystal in their hands. Seeing this, the old man was even more horrified, shouting that the heavens will surely punish them for this. However, the protagonist replied in a confident voice that these were not defense stones, but were the crystals that made up the entire world, and if they were broken, spatial cracks would appear. To prove his words, Xiao Yu and the others threw the crystals on the ground, thus shattering them. Immediately after that, spatial rifts began to appear in the sky. Along with them, memories from the past that he had forgotten a long time ago began to return to the head of the village head, proving that the guy's words were true and that they had really just fallen into this world. The memories that reminded him of who he really was, namely the head of the class, brought tears to the village head's eyes. After all the former false villagers got their memories and bodies back, system windows immediately started to appear in front of everyone, informing them that the mission had been successfully completed, as one of the players had successfully awakened the villagers. It was also reported that rewards would be calculated based on everyone's individual points. With a warm smile after thanking the protagonist, the former village head returning back to his world thanked the protagonist sincerely. Also starting to move back to his world, Yang Xiangdi admiringly asked Xiao Yu how he managed to find out how to get through the mission, to which he replied that he would tell them about it when they returned. However, a moment later, to the bewilderment and incomprehension of the guys, they had not moved anywhere and were still in the village. Suddenly, a system window appeared in front of them, in which the system congratulated them for destroying the Black Nightmare stones. In addition, because of their actions, they had been assigned a new E-rank mission in which they had to retrieve the heart of the nightmares. This turn of events was a surprise for our hero, but it was also a great chance to become stronger.